All right, so China's new annual economic plan is out, and it's got everyone talking. On one hand, they're setting a pretty modest growth target, but on the other, they're planning a massive, record-breaking deficit. Now, that might sound like a contradiction, but it's not. It's actually a huge strategic pivot with some serious global implications, and that's exactly what we're going to decode today. Yeah, when you first see the headlines, they do seem to clash, right? You've got this record deficit, which usually screams massive stimulus, but then you've got this surprisingly moderate growth target. So what is really going on here? What's the actual game plan? That's the core question we're going to unpack. Okay, first things first, let's just lay out the official blueprint. We got to understand the key numbers and targets that Beijing is putting on the table for 2026 to really see what they're committing to in public.
And the number grabbing all the headlines? The GDP growth target. It's been set in a range between 4.5% and 5%. And what's really interesting here is just how, well, pragmatic it is. It's a solid number for sure, but it definitely signals they're shifting gears, moving away from that breakneck speed of the past and focusing on what they're calling high-quality development.
And you can see how the other targets back this up. A pretty mild inflation goal of around 2% and an urban unemployment rate hovering around 5.5%. You put it all together and it paints a picture of an economy that's all about stability and sustainable, steady growth, not just pumping the gas pedal to the floor.
And you have to remember, this one-year plan is just the start of something much bigger. 2026 is the kickoff for China's massive 15th five-year plan. So this focus on stability this year, it's really about laying a solid foundation for these huge, long-term goals they have for the digital economy, for their green transition, and for society as a whole.
All right, so if the growth target is modest, where is all this money from that record deficit supposed to go? And that brings us to the heart of their strategy, a massive bet on fiscal firepower, with the central government stepping up to play a much, much bigger role.
And this is the big one, folks. For years, a 3% budget deficit was kind of seen as this unwritten rule, an unofficial red line for Chinese policy. Well, in 2026, they're not just crossing it, they're striding right over it. And that's a huge signal that the central government is dead serious about stepping in to support the economy.
The new target is set at around 4% of GDP. In real money, that's a jaw-dropping 5.89 trillion yuan. The key takeaway here is that Beijing is deliberately putting its own powerful balance sheet on the line to get things done. And this table here shows you exactly how they're planning to spend it. It's really a three-part attack. You've got the main deficit, another 1.3 trillion yuan in special bonds for big strategic projects, and a total budget of over 30 trillion yuan. But what is all this, really? It's a massive transfer of leverage. The central government is taking on the debt to give local governments and the private sector the breathing room they desperately need to recover.
But hey, this strategy isn't just about throwing money around. At the same time, the government is trying to fundamentally change the rules of the game for businesses to solve a very specific, very deep-seated problem that's been dragging the economy down. That problem is called involution, or Nadrian. It basically describes this trap where companies get stuck in these vicious, zero-sum competitions. We're talking brutal price wars that just end up crushing profits for the entire industry. You know the saying, it's like everyone running faster and faster just to stay in the same place.
So the government's trying to force a major strategic shift. As you can see here, the whole goal is to steer industries away from that old model, just competing on who's cheapest, and push them towards a new way of doing business, one that's based on technology, quality, and actually building pricing power on the world stage.
So, how are they going to do it? Well, this isn't just talk. They're pulling out some serious policy tools, stronger regulations, cracking down with anti-monopoly laws, using stricter environmental standards to push out the old, inefficient players. It's all designed to weed out the weak and force the survivors to climb up the value chain. All of this is in service of creating what they're calling the new productive forces.
Okay, so what in the world does this all mean if you're an investor? Well, this new mix of policies creates a very different kind of market, and analysts are saying it pretty much requires a whole new playbook to navigate successfully.
And a really popular way to think about this new approach is something called the dumbbell strategy. It's a great analogy, really, for how to balance the different forces that are at play in this new economic landscape.
Let's break that down. One end of the dumbbell is your defense. Think stable, high-dividend sectors like banks or big state-owned companies that really benefit from the government's focus on stability. And the other end? That's your offense. We're talking high-growth sectors like AI and advanced manufacturing, the very industries that are the direct targets of all that new strategic government spending.
It's a strategy that's really designed to capture both safety and growth in this new environment.
So here's the bottom line. China is actively, deliberately trying to rewire its entire economic growth model. The focus is shifting away from pure speed and toward quality, away from price wars and toward technological leadership. And they're using the central government's own balance sheet to steer the ship. As the country's economy sails into this new era, the biggest risk might not be the policy changes themselves, but simply ignoring them. So I'll leave you with this. What will you be watching?